lifestyle. Sports cards and we live now. Jeremy Lee in the building and every guest that you ever needed. Sports cards after hours keep the hobby heated. Updates, hobby talk like you never seen it. Sports cards live and none could ever beat it. Sports cards is a lifestyle. Sports cards and we live now. Welcome to another episode of Sports Cards Live with your host, Jeremy Lee.
All right, everybody. Welcome to episode number 233 of Sports Cards Live. It's Saturday night, July the 13th, 2024, and my name is Jeremy Lee. I would like to thank everybody who joined us last week. Had a fun episode with Joe Perreault. Check that one out. And PWCC Hockey Weekly Auction Ending Party tomorrow with Josh Madigan is back. We'll be here tomorrow night starting at 6:30 Pacific Standard Time, guys. And next Saturday, I'm planning a double feature, a national themed double feature with the first show with David Marino and the second show with Chris Sewell and Jeremy Donson, the Texas Snowman. Guys, Filth Bomb Breaks offers live case and box breaks, and they do so with responsibility and integrity. And if you enjoy group breaks and are looking for a company to break with, please check out Filth Bomb Breaks streaming on Fanatics 7 days a week over 4 channels. And if you're looking to add a grail to your collection, make sure to check out Fund Your Cards, the hobby's leading consolidator. They will help you finance the purchase with your own cards. You can visit fundyourcards.com and tell them Jeremy Lee sent you. I'd like to shout out hobbynewsdaily.com. Check out Hobby News Daily for a great collection of articles by various authors, podcasts, and more. Also, Leighton Sheldon, Just Collect, will be joining us later today for the Vintage Spotlight segment. And guys, this show is also available on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Please follow, subscribe for free, and leave a review or rating at your convenience. Would greatly appreciate that. And as always, thank you to all of our loyal viewers and listeners. If you are not yet subscribed to the YouTube channel or podcast, please take a moment and do so. And as always, tonight, guys, your comments, your questions are in play. Let's get to it. Tonight's guest started in the hobby in 1981 when his dad would take him to the corner gas station to get packs of O-Pee-Chee hockey cards. After a lull in high school, he got back in at the tail end of the junk wax era and has been involved in the hobby ever since. He started his blog, My Hockey Card Obsession, in 2009 and continues to add articles to this day. His favorite athletes of all time are Trevor Linden, Jacques Plante, Oscar Gamble, and Brock Besser. And his favorite team of all time is the Vancouver Canucks. He's originally from and currently hailing out of Calgary, Alberta. Let's bring him out. Brett Miles, welcome to Sports Cards Live. My friend, how are you?
I'm doing great, Jeremy. How are you? 233. Awesome.
Episode 233. I am doing well. It's great to have you, Brett. And I want to let everybody know who's watching, listening. So you and I, Brett, we go back. I mean, I think I've known you for 20 years. You're local. You've been to all the trade nights. We used to go to Maple Leaf Sports for trade night. The third Wednesday of every month, something like that. I'd see you there month after month, year after year. You're a passionate collector. You're a loyal collector, and just a really nice guy who's always very encouraging and just a nice presence in the local hobby scene here in Calgary. So it's nice to have you on, Brett. I'm glad we're finally able to do this.
Wow. I appreciate the kind words, Jeremy. And right back at you. You're right. It's been probably over 20 years. I probably have known you most through Hobby Insider, the chat board. But I'm pretty sure I knew of you prior to that on the old Beckett boards. And that goes way back. And so, but seeing you at the shows, seeing you at the stores, trade nights, absolutely. I'm drawn to people with an air of positivity, and you've got it in spades. So it's an honor to be on the show, and thanks for the invite.
Yeah, no, for sure. Let's go to some comments. There's lots of talk. Today ended up, we haven't chatted about this yet, you and I, but today ended up being a historical day that no one was expecting just a few hours ago. And, this isn't a show about politics, but I do feel like with the assassination attempt on Donald Trump today, that today will go down in infamy. It will become a date in history that people will remember. And that one photograph of him after he got up with his arms like this and the American flag behind him and the Secret Service surrounding him, that I feel like that I saw some people say that'll be the most famous picture in history. I don't know if I can disagree with that. Like it's a big day when something like this happens. I just want to acknowledge it. And Trump did not die, but others did. And very, very, very sad, but I think worth acknowledging. And unless you have anything to add to that, Brett, I want to go to some comments from the chat. Anything you'd like to say about that?
No, it's I think at a time like this, you put all of your biases aside and you think about those that have been affected. And yeah, as you said, there were people who actually were killed today in that event. And it brings things into perspective, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, that's it right there. It really, really does. Let's say hello to Bill Betts. What's going on, Bill? Jacob Dahl, Al Terwell. What's happening? Todd McDonald, Al G, another local collector that we're friends with and well. Good to see. And Al's a former guest on the show. Good to see you, Al. Justin Bode. Good evening, Wes D. Are we going to get news on the Trump? Well, you've just got, I don't know that we can provide you anything new, but CNN will give you what you need and other outlets, I am sure. Chris C., what's going on? Jeff McMahon, Joe Pawich, another local collector. Good to see you, buddy. Been a long time since I've seen Joe in person, but always good to see your name, Joe. Julio, good evening to you. Anything to Robert Scott, what's going on? Justin Bode, always good to see you, buddy. Mark Santucci, what's happening, Mark? Cleveland, we'll see you in Cleveland in a couple of weeks. Daniel Brown, what's happening? Praying for Trump. You're not alone. It's like Brett said, put your biases aside and maybe life first. Mike Double V, what's happening? Good to see you. Good to see you. Craig's Cards is here. Chris C, Jay, welcome everybody to the show tonight. And let's get into a little bit of you, Brett. So I wanted to dive into your hobby history. I feel like, again, I've known you for about 20 years, but what really, your dad would take you to the corner gas station, you'd pick up packs of hockey cards, and that got you into the hobby. But kind of give us a bit more of a detailed outline of your hobby history from those early days through until now.
Sure, absolutely. Like you said, it was, I grew up in the 80s. 80-81 was the first year I collected. So I missed the Gretzky rookie year by one. I always think about, how maybe things would have been different as a kid if I had the Gretzky rookie. I've never owned one. But yeah, going to the Turbo gas station, which I live literally a block away from where it would have been. And at that time, it was, be late fall, early winter. You're going to the gas station every week. You're seeing if the packs are out. And when they were, it was an exciting time. You'd grab a couple packs, you'd spend your allowance, you'd open up the packs, chew the gum, and away you go. You're trading with your friends at school the next day. And I think a lot of people in the 80s, that was collecting. That was the hobby at the time. You would, it wasn't about how much was this, how much is this card's this card's that. It was, I need to complete my set. I need 396. That's the magic number growing up as a kid, 396. And so it, you would get your set for the year and then you were done. There was only one product that came out in Canada for hockey. It was the stickers and it was the cards. And it was not a 12-month-a-year endeavor.
Right.
And so yeah, did that for a number of years and enjoyed it and walked around with, yeah.
I just want to jump in and be like, because you said that, it was about 396, which was the amount of cards in the O-Pee-Chee set basically every year. I think 85, 86 was smaller, but in any event, that was the number. We knew that. And like you said, it was just about getting those 396 cards. There was none that was worth more than the other, really. It was I remember, Brett, at one point I needed one card to finish off a set. I think I traded everything I had for that one because I didn't care. I wanted to finish. Did you ever have any kind of transactions like that you can recall now where, you overpaid because you needed what you needed?
100%. My nemesis card growing up was Borje Salming. Borje Salming, for some reason, I would never get him in the packs. And so I had to trade. And it wasn't just one season. There was a couple seasons where he was near the last card on my list. And we all had the paper list with all of our numbers and the cards that we needed. And Borje Salming was the one. And yeah, I'm sure, if you were to take that trade and bring it into today's world, people would be like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're trading a Gretzky second year for a Borje Salming? Yeah, I am. Yeah. I am, because I need that card to go in my little box of cards and finish my set. And I loved that. Finishing the set, that's what it was all about.
That's all it was about. So, and that's a typical story for a kid growing up in Canada as far as hockey goes. And listen, we got a lot of American viewers, and I know that it's the same for you guys. Whether it was your Topps baseball or your Donruss or Fleer in the early 80s or your Topps football sets, it was the same thing back in the schoolyard. But the turning point for me somewhat, Brett, was when I saw that first Beckett price guide, and all of a sudden these cards had values associated to them. And I remember being in probably grade 4, grade 5. I felt like I was rich all of a sudden because I had $80 worth of cards. $80 was a lot of money back then, So
this was my first price guide that I had.
Wow.
It's $8.95 and it came out in the mid 80s. And they didn't even talk about rarity or stuff like that. They talked about, caring for your collection, how to acquire cards. But the one page that really got me was the one where they talked more about, there were the specialty cards. There were no, short prints or anything like that. And they called them demand cards. And I just thought that was hilarious that these cards were the ones that were in demand. But let me see if I can find it real quick. And the Wayne Gretzky rookie card, which still sits unmarked on my checklist.
Oh,
I don't know if you can see it.
$20.
A whopping $20, and that's mint.
That's mint.
Mint $20.
But do you remember when the Becketts first started coming out, and just that shift in mindset amongst, people I knew that were collecting, my friends that collected it at the time? You recall that as well? Hey, yeah, interesting.
100%. Hot lists, cold lists. All of a sudden, players there was value in cards, and I wasn't in the hobby at that time. Like early 90s that was a time that I was a bit out, but when I got back in, the Beckett was a monthly requirement because there was a lot of volatility, I think, in card prices back then, and there was a lot of new knowledge that collectors were getting from these magazines.
A lot of volatility, but we didn't know about it until that magazine hit the shelves. Nowadays, you know it within minutes.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your first ticket stub.
Oh, yeah. First hockey game. And this, you know what? I really think this is part of how I got into collecting, realizing that there are moments that are or things, tangible items that can be reminders for, core memories in our life. And it was, I would have been 12, 11, 12. And it was my first hockey game. Saddle Dome was new. And, I was still not fully aware of, hockey live. It was something you would see on TV every once in a while, and that's about it. But, and I had no idea the impact of the game at that time, the importance of the game, or even the players on the ice. I knew who some of them were, but anybody remember this game at the Saddle Dome? These were the 2 tickets. My dad and I went, and it was a spur of the moment event. This was not tickets on the fridge for 4 months leading up to the day. It was Dad coming home from work and going, "You want to go see a hockey game tonight?" And
what game was that?
that was the '85 All-Star game here in Calgary. It was Mario Lemieux as a rookie. It was Wayne Gretzky in his prime. And it was, and again, I had no idea. I saw Pelle Lindbergh play in the Saddle Dome. And so, yeah, thanks to YouTube, I can go back and relive the game because I don't remember much of it, hardly anything at all. My lasting memory of it was, I think Al McInnes was one of the Flames, and he got the biggest ovation. And for some reason, the Toronto representative, Miroslav Fricher, that name stuck with me all these years later. Those are my memories from that game. I don't remember much of the gameplay itself, but I knew it was an important game. And yeah,
that's awesome.
I'm glad I kept those tickets.
Yeah, that's a really cool keepsake, especially since you went with your father, kind of spur of the moment thing. So you collected the sets every year, like a lot of us did through the 80s. The 90s come along, junk wax era. You're kind of out a little bit. You get back in, say, the mid 90s, and then the early 2000s roll around. Just kind of for people who, one of the things I like about doing shows like this is that, you know, our guest here, Brett, guys, he's going to tell you how he remembers these times, and you guys are going to sit there and be like, yeah, I remember that too. And we all kind of have that commonality. So I want Brett to kind of, you know, be the conductor and orchestrate us through a reliving of our memories from the late 90s into the early 2000s. Just like what are your recollections of the hobby when you first came back in at the tail end of the junk wax era?
It was amazing. You saw cards everywhere, corner stores. There were more card shops. Card shows were twice a month here, and that was something that was completely new to me. I'd never gone to a card show in the 80s. I didn't know what those were. There were a lot of outlets, a lot of ways to enjoy the hobby, but it was overwhelming. There was so much out there. Junk wax era, new products, everybody had their sets coming out, and I didn't know what connected with me. I was still trying to collect sets, junk wax era sets. Really? I learned quick that wasn't connecting with me. Vintage, I'll do vintage. So I started working on the sets from the 70s, building those, going to the shows, getting singles. And that was a ton of fun, make no mistake. But there's a reason why I don't have my vintage sets in my storage area anymore. It's not there. It never stuck with me. It was a trip to a card show, and I remember this vividly. It would have been late 90s, and you're walking around to the tables, and I'm sure everybody has seen those card boxes where they're labeled by players. Here's the Gretzky pack, here's the Lemieux stuff, here's the this player and the that player. And in the mid to late 90s, believe it or not, my guy, Trevor Linden, actually had a slot in some of those boxes. And I saw a box, and there was a stack, maybe yay thick of cards, 40, 50 cards, all different, 10 cents a piece. And I just started flipping through the cards, looking at them, thinking, wow, this is cool. He was my guy since he was drafted. I enjoyed watching him play, but I never thought of him as a guy to collect until that moment. 10 cents a card, 50 cards, like for $5, I've got a Trevor Linden collection. And it happened like that. And from that moment forward, that has been the staple of my hobby collecting, has been Linden. And
why was Trevor Linden your guy in the first? It's not like you discovered that stack of cards for $5 and said, "Oh, here's the guy I'm going to collect." No, he was your guy. Why was he your guy?
There were a couple of years that I lived in Medicine Hat prior to him playing for the Tigers. My family knew his family. My dad worked a little bit with his dad, and so we would, every once in a while, we would get together as families, maybe do a barbecue or something like that. Not often or anything like that, but we would get together. And I was close. Trevor has an older brother and a younger brother, and I was closer in age to his younger brother, Jamie. And So we connected a little bit more, doing whatever, playing video games, etc. But watching Trevor, all of a sudden he's playing in a Memorial Cup. He's playing, what's happening here? He's getting drafted by the Vancouver Canucks, second overall. He must be pretty good. And at the time, again, I didn't go, well, I've got to start collecting his stuff. I wasn't in that mode. I was out of the hobby in the early 90s. But late 90s, all of a sudden it clicked. This guy who, he was a fantastic player, a great leader on the ice. And we'll get to it later, but the stuff he does off the ice is equally as impressive. He is a leader in the community. He's got a lot of positivity, and it's trickles down from the top. If you ever get a chance to listen to his parents talk, it's a special family. And so it was an easy connection for me. It wasn't just throwing a dart and going, well, I'm going to collect this guy. There was some meaning behind it. And so, it was quick, and it stuck, and I've been going ever since.
So, well, that's what I want to hear. Like, I think that's what can inspire people when we're looking, you often see people saying, well, who should I collect? It's like, well, if you're going to ask the crowd who you should collect, you're probably not going to really be into it. So you need to sort of find now, it's not like anyone can go out and have a barbecue with right? You're lucky. But for other people looking for a reason to collect somebody, as Brett just said, this guy was a leader in the community. He gave back. And that's very inspirational. I think that resonates with a lot of people. So those are great reasons to collect a player, right?
I think there are a lot of opportunities to really find positives in a player, and be it they've got good hustle on the ice. They're a leader on the ice. They do amazing things. They've got flair. They've got pizzazz. They've got whatever it is. That's awesome. And if that connects with you and you continue it through, awesome. I think that's amazing. We should all be so lucky to find that player, because he was drafted high, and then away you go. And 6 months later, there's another flavor of the month. We see a lot of that. And I'm very fortunate and grateful that the guy that I started collecting in the late 90s is the guy I'm equally passionate about collecting today.
That's an amazing piece right there. I kind of shared that with Dale Hawerchuk a little bit. I remember searching for his rookie card in the 82-83 series when those came out on January 1st, 1983. I remember getting those first packs and walking through school with them in my pocket. So, and still to this day, do it. I have a daily search, and I'm still picking up cards here and there. Let's say hello to Stukes. What's going on, Stukes? Always good to see you. Justin Bode. First pack was a 93-94 Score Hockey from 7-Eleven, 5 houses up the street. Yeah, the old childhood corner store. Todd McDonald, so funny. He says, so funny you mentioned 396. Always been a number that stands out every time it comes up. I have that price list too. Love looking back at them. No doubt. That's always fun to look back. Mark Santucci has the stapled issues of Beckett magazines. Yeah. So Brett, I got to ask you again, like mid 2000s come around, 2010s come around, the hobby evolves. Now there's pack pulled autographs and there's memorabilia cards and all this sort of stuff. What was your thought process when you first realized I can get a piece of jersey or a piece of patch or a patch and an autograph on a card? Like I remember how I felt.
I'm going to roll it back just a bit. So I started collecting late 90s and going to shows, going to not even trade nights at that time, probably. It was probably shows and stores and opening packs. That's how I was getting my cards. 2000, pillar moment in my collecting. I discovered eBay and the online collecting world. And I love the fact, I'm fortunate that I live in a city where they have card shows. And at the time, it was twice a month. To have a card show every day at my fingertips, loaded with Linden cards, I'm a kid in a candy store right now. And it was on. buying cards that I never thought I'd get. You talk about jersey cards and autographs and patches. He didn't have those right away. Parallels, numbered parallels out of 56. I remember that one of the Pacific parallels, because that was the great eye opener for me. I got those 50 cards from the show. I thought I had them all. No. He had a couple hundred cards, more than that even at that point. Parallels. eBay solved that problem for me, and I just started gobbling it up, and it was amazing. Getting bubble mailers every week and crossing cards off the list I never thought I would cross off.
And you're still working off a list, aren't you?
Yeah, my master list is. I love my master list, and it's thanks to the Becketts and the Charltons and the all the different guides out there. But then, and this goes back to the eBay stories as well, I learned that there were other Linden collectors out there who were just as passionate as I, and a lot of times they would outbid me for the bigger ticket cards, which frustrated me back then. And eBay back in the 2000s, you could find out quite easily who outbid you, and you could actually reach out to them, which is exactly what I did. And after a few, hard defeats on some cards, I reached out, and I'm so thankful that I did, because I've met Linden collectors through that we may not connect as often now as we once did, but to this day, I know I could probably reach out to them, and it would be, a super positive, hey, how's it going? Great to hear from you.
That's a nice thing. And I know from watching you, just operate in the hobby over the last several years on whether it was Beckett boards or Hobby Insider or just at trade nights where I'd see you in person, I know that that you were part of like 3 or 4 serious Linden collectors. And I remember I'd say to you, did you see this card? You'd be like, yeah, but such and such is, he's going to get this one. I'll get the next one. Like, you guys would help, you'd help each other. We
would take flack for that. I remember taking flack for that people are like, you can't do that. You're altering the final price of the card. You need to bid this up. I'm like, if I know I'm not going to win, I'm not going to bid. And so, yeah, it was a realization for me as well. I'm a completist. I want one of every card he has. But knowing that there were other Linden collectors out there really opened my eyes to the realization that probably wasn't going to happen. And there was also a set in the late 90s that destroyed any thought of getting one of every one of his cards. So the Topps gold label from the late 90s, there were 3 parallels. It was the gold sort of base version, and then the black label, and then the red label. Do you guys remember these?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a tough shiny. There we go.
Yeah.
So he had nine cards, because there was like a class 1, class 2, class 3 of each one of these cards. So 9 cards. They made a 1 of 1 of every single one of those cards. So 9 1 of 1 cards in one product. There's no way. I'm never getting all 9 of them. I love the fact that I got 1, because that's good enough for me.
Yeah,
so,
that represents all of them in a way, which is great.
Yeah.
So the introduction of low prints, 1 of 1s, really had to you had no option really. It forced you to just sort of change a little bit your approach to collecting Trevor Linden, because you're a completionist, as you said, but you gotta throw in the towel at some point, as everybody has had to by now, right?
Absolutely. It was it frustrating at first? Sure, absolutely. But it quickly turned to, you know what? This is the landscape that I'm collecting in, and I either need to find peace with it and enjoy it, or I'm not going to be a grumpy guy in this hobby. I got no time for that. So let's have some fun. The fact that I know where some of these other one-of-ones live, that's fantastic. I know where a lot of those other top school label one-of-ones are. I love that. That is the next best thing. I cross it off my list because of that.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. I'd like to keep talking along those lines. We'll get back to, I want to do some comments from the chat. Then we're going to bring Leighton on for the vintage spot. And I know you got a great question for him. So let's say hello to Name. What's going on, Name? Good to see you, buddy. Chris C says the 1980s for me and others, it was about trading. I wouldn't trade growing up in the 80s for anything. Call it junk wax era if you wish, but cards weren't expensive and no grading to make it complicated. Weren't those the times, Chris, right? Things sure have changed. They have certainly evolved since then. And I just want to say on that, you can still hobby that way today. You have that power. I believe it. I fiercely believe you can still do that if you're able to put blinders on to the things that distract you. Justin Boat says, I was thinking about it this morning. Nothing was better than getting that new Beckett on a Friday night. No school the next day. Stuke says, I was collecting 11 years before I saw a price guide and discovered these cards I love looking at and playing games with were actually worth something. If you were collecting the 80s and Beckett came out, or a different price guide, you remember that. What's up, Yitz? Welcome to the show. We are live. Justin Bode says, my dad would buy me a pack. I'd look at the Beckett and all the possible pulls, then wait on the pack and open it a couple hours later. Good memories. Chris C says, I wish I could get a Kobe 50 card collection for $5. That's a great story about Trevor Linden. And I'm glad he's also a great guy, which is the best way to, especially if you don't know it when you start collecting a player, when you realize they're a good guy or a great gal nowadays, it's like, it's a cherry on top to just sort of affirm what you're doing. Random Esports says, always listen to your heart and collect. Great advice. Al G says, are there many Linden cards in recent series? And if so, what's your strategy? Let's table that one for now, Brett, but if you can remember, we'll come back to it. Foul 5-ball, Jeremy, what is going on? Doghouse Hockey, Bobby Burrell says, it would seem to reinforce by what you're saying is that 1990 is the great divide between vintage and modern. I've seen a lot of talk on that lately, and I think I heard someone recently refer to the 80s as ultra vintage, and I actually really like that because I like it, Brett, because I think that vintage ends, for me, it ends after 1988, 89, but for so many, it's 1980 is the new modern. So, but I think it's because I'm hockey, and hockey is a bit different than baseball, and so I think that ultra vintage or whatever you want to call it, I can accept that compromise as far as labeling that era. And we can come back to these after if you want, Brett. Random Esports says, ooh, mem cards. Simon says, if you're a Trevor Linden fan, does that mean you also hate Mark Messier like every other Canucks fan from the late 90s? He's nodding in agreement, not a Messier fan.
No.
Joe Paulwich says, eBay was a revelation. Freddie Esquivel, welcome to the show. And Random Esports says, you got to win Powerball to collect nowadays. Okay, we'll come back to some of those like the Messier piece and anything else there. But let's bring on Leighton for the Vintage Spotlight segment. There he is. Leighton, I usually say, are you ready? I didn't this time, but you are ready. Good to see you, Leighton. Please meet Brett. Brett, please meet Leighton, guys.
Hey, Brett, how are you?
Good, you?
Oh, great, thank you. I enjoyed the last few minutes listening to you talk about, like the era I grew up collecting.
Yeah.
I'm having a little trouble hearing you. If there's any way you could get a bit closer to your mic, appreciate that if you can.
Yeah.
Brett, let's go ahead and pose the question you have for Leighton.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go back to, and congratulations to the both of you on the Vintage Spotlight podcast. I've listened to the first couple of episodes, and I want to go back to episode 1. And you used a term that really perked my ears, especially when it comes to vintage, something that I don't normally tinker in with new cards coming out, especially I don't deal with graded cards. Eye appeal. And you had a wonderful side-by-side example of a pair of mantles, and you talked a bit about eye appeal, centering, surface, corners, you name it. And I just thought it was fascinating because each of you had your own sort of those one or two that you noticed right away and commented on, and I found it fascinating. So my question, what are your top three, in your personal opinion, and I get that it's subjective, your top three eye appeal traits? And then as a follow-up, I'd like your underrated eye appeal trait when it comes to vintage.
It's a great question, Brett. Hopefully you can hear me a little bit better now, guys. So, when it comes to eye appeal, Brett, the first thing that comes to mind these days, which is a little bit different than when I was a kid. So these days, it's definitely centering. But when I was a kid in my teens, my early 20s, I mean, if someone showed me a vintage card with sharp corners, that was really exciting to me. So that would be number 2 on my list. And then number 3 would really be surface. And, surface has to do with like scuffing or, any damage, of course, paper loss, etc. And I feel like that's what comes to mind for the top 3 as far as eye appeal. And if you had to say to me underrated, it's interesting because I remember years ago, Brett, grading a number of cards of PSA. And I got my first, it was like a PSA 7, and I think it was OF. And I'm like, what is that? It was out of focus. And for a lot of folks, when you look at a card, you don't necessarily think about a focus because most of the time they are in focus. However, I was recently getting some cards ready, prepped, and priced for the National. And 2 cards come to mind, specifically the number 144, 1933 Goalie Babe Ruth, and then the 1949 Bowman Jackie Robinson. And if you look at those 2 cards in particular, there's a shifting on the color, which inevitably causes just to be a little bit out of focus. And if you don't look for it, it's not the end of the world, Brett. But now that I know it's there, every time I look at those 2 cards, inevitably I'm looking forward to see how the focus is. And so even though I don't look at the focus maybe on every card, if you had to ask me what I think is a little bit underrated, it might be, is the card actually focused? Hopefully that answers your question.
I like that a lot. I read, focus. Yeah, that's one that I don't think about. You're right. Corners and surface and centering. Absolutely. I like that. But yeah, the focus of the card, that's good. Thank you.
You kind of say it might be underrated, something we didn't think about. But if you've been watching this channel, my content on YouTube at all for the last couple of years, I feel like I'm single-handedly trying to bring focus, or what I usually just call registration, out from being underrated and into the forefront, because I think it's so important. I think for me, it's more important than corners or edges. Centering's very important too. But to me, if a card isn't in focus, I don't want it regardless of what everything else looks like. Whereas I would take an off-centered card if everything else was really, really strong. So, but great question, Brett. Great answer from Leighton. Did he get everything you wanted to touch on there, Brett?
Absolutely. I love that because I think there's a lot of subjectivity when it comes to eye appeal. Eye appeal there's no sort of one rule for everybody. And that's why I loved in that episode with the 2 Mansells. It's like, yeah, you know what? This one is the one I think, Jeremy, you were talking about the one that had more vibrant colors and not as much, snow and, or just surface issues. And even though that card was better centered, and I thought, wow, that I almost didn't expect that. So it was great. It's great to hear the conversation about eye appeal. You talked about the grade. I think you said it was a 7, but out of focus. Does the grade of a card count as part of eye appeal nowadays, do you think?
Definitely. I mean, when they grade a card, I'm not talking about like a Mike Baker or a PWCC additional grading of the grade, but I believe when PSA looks at a card, for example, if a card exhibits a lot of positive traits, for example, in those three areas we just talked about. And it's in between, not so much like an 8 and a 9, because I believe there's a lot of technical aspects on the higher grades that have to be met. But I think when you're talking about, for example, like a 4 to a 5 or a 4 to a 4.5, I believe when you start to exhibit some of those stronger qualities within, let's say, like a given grade, that's how you get a half grade or a grade above. I do believe that's the case.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, I greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
Leighton, did you happen to have any sort of questions or topics to raise here with Brett and myself?
Well, I'm curious, Brett, I know a little bit about Trevor Linden, but I know a lot about collecting in that era. And, I myself do like to open wax, particularly vintage, but I also really do enjoy opening like late 80s and 90s wax. So I'm curious, have you ever opened up wax in pursuit of trying to get the Trevor Linden card you need for your collection?
Absolutely. It's funny. I don't open as much wax nowadays. And to me, opening a pack of cards, I still think that's the essence of the hobby. Opening the cards and seeing what you're going to get. And I don't do it as much. And part of it is because he isn't in as many products. So I find when he is in a certain product, I'll open some packs. Absolutely. Trying to get a Linden. Absolutely. I vividly remember opening a pack. It was from one of the O-Pee-Chee sets from the early 2000s, I think, or later 2000s. And it was a four-player jersey card, and it had the Linden in there, and it was a 2-color Linden. And I thought, that's the greatest Linden card I've ever pulled out of a pack, and it still sits in my collection. And that's a story I get to tell now when I look at that card and share it with people. That's the story connected to it. I've opened a pack of cards. I always hope I find a Linden in my pack. If it's a base card, you're darn right it's going to be the one that goes into my master collection. Even if I've got it already, I'll swap out the other one because I know the story behind the card.
Nice. I love it. Cool. I love it. Leighton, so we have 2 episodes of the Vintage Spotlight are out there. They're on YouTube. They're on podcast. It is its own podcast, guys. We've got 2 episodes so far, and we are going to be recording episode 3, I believe, next week. That is the plan. So everybody, please watch out for that, guys. And if you're not yet, you can follow Leighton on Instagram at Leighton_Sheldon, _collect. Even better, you can meet him in person at the National in Cleveland a couple of weeks from right now. And of course, his other podcast, Trading Card Therapy. Leighton, anything else that you'd like to mention before we wrap up the Vintage Spotlight segment?
I would. Has nothing to do with either you, Jeremy, or Brett. Listen, if you are not living under a rock in the hobby and utilize some sort of social, you heard about what happened in Dallas. Okay, so what I want to talk about very briefly is when you go to the National, it really doesn't have to do with a dealer. It doesn't necessarily have to do with a collector. It might just have to do with the mom and pop that brings their son there. But all I would try to encourage everyone to do is, it's not a perfect system right now. Our industry is experiencing a ton of growth. And unfortunately for Ashish and his family, they suffered a substantial setback. But let's try to learn from it and go to the National. This is what I encourage everyone to do. If you see something that looks out of place, say something. It doesn't matter if it has to do with a collector, if it has to do with a dealer, if it has to do with security and something seems off to you. All I can suggest is everyone's going to go there and they're going to spend quite a bit of money, whether it be as a collector or just simply as a visitor to the convention center and to the convention itself. So do yourselves a favor. Let's look out for each other. We're all a big hobby community. That's all I wanted to share.
Great message. The way I think about that, Leighton, is when I'm at a booth, a vendor's booth, and I might just be looking in their showcases, and they could be on the other side talking to somebody. There could be somebody kind of maybe 2 people down from me, and maybe I feel like that person 2 down from me might be getting a little weird with their hands. Like we can all be security guards at these card shows at any booth that we are at. I think that's what you're getting at, or at least it's part of. You're getting it more, but you are getting that too. So, like you said, some people might come across you might risk falsely accusing somebody of something or falsely thinking something. You got to make that decision for you if you want to say something at that point. But I mean, right now, maybe better safe than sorry is the best approach. So great message, Leighton. Thanks for coming on, joining us as you often do. Glad you got to meet Brett. I'll see you next week to record the Vintage Spotlight podcast, and hopefully back here next Saturday night for another segment.
Looking forward to it, everybody. Nice meeting you, Brett.
Thanks, Leighton. Good to talk to you.
Take care, Jeremy.
All right. Bye-bye, Leighton. All right. Oh, goodness. Okay, Brett, I need to step away for a second because I hear a kid yelling right now, and my wife is out with some friends. So can you hold down the fort, literally give me 2 minutes and just tell a story? Maybe what's the deal with Mark Messier? And I'll be right back.
Come on. You can't go there. Yeah, I'll talk. Oh gosh.
Sorry. I was gonna take myself off. I'm gonna leave you. Here you go. I'll be right back, guys.
Holy cow. Mark Messier? Are you kidding me? Okay. I think Canuck fans know the story behind, it's not just Messier, it's Keenan. And bringing those two into Vancouver, not a big fan there. Not a big fan. And it was the first step to see Linden move away from Vancouver. And that was a tough period for me as a Canucks fan and as a Linden collector. And it really made me think, okay, am I collecting him because of the crest on the front or because of the nameplates on the back? And I quickly realized that he was more than just a Vancouver Canuck, and that I could keep collecting him. And I know that there are a lot of player collectors out there that when their favorite player gets traded and moves on, that becomes a challenge. Can I keep collecting that player? For me, absolutely. There was no hesitation. It was something that I was pretty sure about pretty quickly. And so, he was a New York Islander. He was a Montreal Canadian. He was a Washington Capital. He played with Yager for all of a handful of games. So, but seeing him come back to Vancouver, that's what brought it all back around to a really, I'm excited. I'm excited for him to be back in a Canucks uniform. He wasn't in as many products sort of in the tail end of his career. He's not a Sedin. He's not a Naslund. He's not a Bertuzzi. He's not a, let's go down the list. He's Linden. So
I don't remember him playing in Washington somehow.
Yeah. He played, gosh, it was less than half a season, maybe a half a season in Washington. And if my memory serves correct, he would have been there for a handful of games at the same time Yager. And if I'm not mistaken, would he have been? Yeah, Yager. So I'm trying to think who else would have been there at the same time. So
Thanks for holding down the fort. Well, I had to step away. We're gonna go back. We're gonna go.
Way to throw me a curveball of a question like that, because Messier in a Canucks uniform or a Rangers uniform, there's just no talk about him. I, believe it or not, I can accept him as an Edmonton Oiler. In the 80s, I'm good with that. But the second that he's facing the Canucks in 94, that's it. I don't like, And then obviously him coming to Vancouver as a Canuck, I got no time for the guy now.
No, I don't know many Canucks fans that do. It's one of those weird situations. You're bringing, an absolute legend comes to your team, and we don't want him. We don't want him. So.
No, all of his cards that I see turn into die cuts or puzzle pieces or.
All right, let's do some comments here. I want to say Freddie Esquivel watching us on his cell and TV. All right, we'll take two screens for sure. Steve Clifton said there was a page in Beckett dedicated to super collectors. Love to see others' collections. And nowadays with social media, we get to see that ad nauseum almost. Chrissy, love 90s inserts. They were innovative for sure. Agree with that. Justin Boat says registration is key after Jeremy drilled it into my head. Yeah, I think I've done a pretty good job of drilling it into some heads of people that come around these parts anyway, because super important to me. Clay Phillips, welcome to the show. Good to see you. And Stukes astutely says Kurt and other cleaning card care products cannot fix registration. No, they certainly cannot. And I'm a huge fan of registration. Obviously, I think that just goes without saying by now. Mark Santucci, what happened in Dallas, Mark? Big theft. $2 million worth of cards were stolen from a very well-known vintage dealer. Chad Shipper, good to see you. We'll see you at the National very soon. And Simon reiterates what I said. It's amazing how universal the hatred is for Messier among Vancouver Canucks fans, for sure. Joe Paul, which says, is a Larry Murphy collector with his rookie card appearing in 81-82. O-Pee-Chee centering is one of the banes of my existence. Yeah, most O-Pee-Chee sets, but I hear Joe, 81 was
the back, the blue on the back. Yeah, no thanks there either. That's tough.
That's tough. So Brett, what have you been doing in the last 3 months with this new phenom entering our sites here? You know, this is you're a hockey guy, so we're talking hockey here, but even if you aren't a hockey collector, you know about Connor Bedard and the Connor Bedard mania that has really swept a lot of the hobby. Like it has gone past just being a hockey thing, and collectors of any sport are kind of curious about Connor Bedard, including our friends from 90s auctions who you know, Josh is a Blackhawks fan. Says Bedard, go Hawks. Of course. But Brett, how have you been adapting to or taking part in the Connor Bedard mania?
I love the fact that I am a spectator, pure spectator. The draw to acquiring Bedard cards is zero for me. And that's because of experience. That's 30 years of being a player collector and going through a lot of trial and error and trying certain things. And you know what, this isn't for me and this, that. It's the same with Crosby when he came in. There was no appeal to, I got to get a Crosby Young Gun. It was the same with Connor McDavid. There was not that I gotta be a part of this massive machine and this hype and this interest and the wave, literal wave of you go from 0 to 100 and then it falls back down a little bit and you don't know what the roller coaster is going to be. Same with Bedard. And I've never, the volatility, we talked about volatility way back. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. The wave, we're talking hourly changes to where things sat in the world of Bedard. And I can't imagine entering into the hobby trying to navigate that, because you know, when you're seeing a lot of other people walking around with those shiny cards, you want those shiny cards. And I'm very fortunate that I found my, branch on the tree that I could just build my nest and enjoy. And every once in a while, go over to some of the other branches and see what's going on. But at the end of the day, that branch, I know I'm very confident with what's on it. And all of those different collections that I have in my world. And I'm at peace with the fact that Bedardomania is not something that hit me in the least. So,
and you see, this is the kind of story and response to Bedard mania, or just the latest, greatest player coming in, that I think is important to get the message out there, because so much of the hobby is based around ultra modern. And it seems like, especially on social media, a lot of social media participants seem to erroneously believe that the whole hobby is all about ultra modern or whatever the super hot trends are at the time, even as far, autograph vintage, whatever it is. There's so much more. There are so many collectors like you, Brett, like Joe Powich in the chat, like Al G in the chat, who just collect their player, and they can exist in this hobby with all the noise that goes on constantly around them and still collect and enjoy this hobby the way they've carved it out for themselves.
100%, 100%. But you don't need to just be a player collector. There are 1,000 million different collections that you can chase. Some of them are, maybe there's not a checklist for it. It's not something that exists, or there's
Brett,
creativity.
You have one. You have another one, and I feel like I want you to just tell everybody. You know the one I'm talking about. That one. Share that. Share what is that? Because guys, the reason why I want Brett to talk about this is because if anyone out there watching, listening, if you're feeling like the hobby is just kind of getting boring for you, uninteresting, you can't afford anything, it's all too expensive, Brett has found ways to always be active in the hobby and without a monstrous budget, right? Like you're working on a hobby budget. So
100%.
Talk about a couple of these other projects that you work on, and I want you to, because I want you to inspire at least one person listening or watching right now.
Absolutely. So it was twofold. My Linden collection is going. Fewer cards being released. It's like, harder to find new editions. So there weren't as many cards coming into my Linden collection. Well, what can I do? What else is out there? And I came across this card. This is the very first card in this collection. And it's Lanny McDonald holding the Stanley Cup up over his head. Okay? This is the pinnacle moment of his playing career right here. And I thought, man, that's a cool card. I've got to have that. Because to me, the Flames winning the Stanley Cup is two guys in pajamas rubbing Lanny in the middle with his head. Like, it's the 3-shot with Tim Hunter and Jim Poplinski, who didn't play in the game. So they're out there in their like PJs, and McDonald in the middle. There he is by himself with the cup over his head. That's an awesome looking card. And I thought, man, I'm gonna keep that aside. And then, as time goes on, I start seeing other cards, of guys. There's Modano, Patrick Roy.
What I love about these, Brett, is that they're all from different sets.
Yes.
I just think adds a nice, it exposes you to different designs and all that as well.
Absolutely. Like, look at this Ray Bourque. I mean, come on. This is it. This is the greatest moment in Ray Bourque's career, period. This is it.
That's the thing.
This card is less than $1. This is less than $1.
It's the pinnacle of their career, and you've got a binder now with cards. Like, guys, come on, chat. Like, is that not a cool? And like Brett said, there's no checklist for it. Brett invented this set, this checklist. It's so cool, man.
What I find interesting is, and I take full credit for this, by the way, is ever since I started collecting this, I call it cup raisers. There are a lot of sets that come out now that are specific to guys holding the Stanley Cup over their head. And I'm like, it makes total sense. Where's my cut of that's my idea. No. I love it. I love the fact that here's an inexpensive way to chase things at local shows. I don't even go to eBay to buy these cards. It's not worth it. But ComC, darn rights, online trades on hobby boards, absolutely options. I love going to trade nights and hey, do you have this one? Nope, thanks. Let's make a trade. You put the word out, people start paying attention to what you collect, and then they keep an eye out for you. And I love that aspect of the hobby. So it's one that I've had a lot of fun with. Like you said, Jeremy, there's no checklist, but there's no expectation either. I don't need to finish this. There's no finishing, by the way. I can go to it whenever I want. I could put it aside for a year. There's no rules. I make the rules. And
you never know. It's not like every year there's going to be another, Connor McDavid outburst based card now. You never know what's going to come. Yep. And that element of surprise right there, Brett, must make it a lot of fun. All right, let's go back to some comments, and then I want to talk about budget collecting a bit more. Joe Perot, good evening to you, Joe. Did I hear the name Oscar Gamble? Yes, you did, and we're going to talk about that right after. Chad Bellany says, picking up Fantilli while everyone is watching Bedard skate by. That might be a great strategy, Chad. Justin Bode says, hockey is such a different collector base. I think it's a great thing to see. It really is. Hockey, like I always like to say, I think the foundation of collecting is probably strongest in baseball just because of the size, followed by hockey. And then I think, basketball and football, while they have their hardcore, passionate, loyal collectors, I just think there's more transient collectors or participants in those two sports than we see. And although with Bedard now, we might be seeing more of that in hockey, but those kind of collectors coming into the hockey space. Doghouse Hockey says, I mentioned this to Jeremy the other day. I have enjoyed the hobby so much more that I am now collecting what I love and not buying into the hype of the day. That's so important there. So important. Random Esports says, just look at all the idiots who bought all the Corbin Carrolls and Wander Francos. That's the risk you run buying the flavor of the day. Mark Santucci is working on collecting cards of family members and Hall of Fame neighbors. That's pretty cool, Mark. Really, really cool. Joe Paulwich says, yeah, we all have to make the hobby work for us, and Brett is a prime example of diversifying and keeping it fresh. No doubt. Brendan Ryan says, Brett's got the right idea. Chad Bellany loves that idea. Cup razors, which I didn't know that you called it that, Brett.
Oh, yeah.
That is definitely cool. Stukes wants to know, does the 1990 Upper Deck Messier, is that where he's got the cup overs? I don't think Brett could add a Messier cup card to his collection. Could you, Brett? Could you?
I'm a completist, my friend. So if Messier needs to be on the list, Messier needs to be on the list, and I will begrudgingly add what I need to into my collection. I just put it in a top loader and put it in, the back of a box, and we'll just leave it there. So it happens, absolutely. So
yeah, right on. LG says, binder projects can be so fulfilling. My latest is Brush with Greatness cards. Two sets redemptions redeemed, very inexpensive. Those inexpensive set pursuits or collecting binder pursuits can really be what we as collectors need when we're going through a phase of maybe not feeling not as willing to spend significant money on cards, or instead of buying $150 cards all the time, I'm going to buy some $3 cards or 25-cent cards because they still can bring me some joy, and they do. It doesn't matter what level you're at. I think you can find. I like this though, Brett. Look at this one from Chris C. Says, raising the cup. Brett needs his own card with the Stanley Cup over his head. Chris goes on to say, Brett's disdain for Messier is like my disdain for anyone calling LeBron the GOAT. Fair enough. James Wynn, what's going on? Good to see you there in the chat. You were going to jump in, Brett. I'll let you jump in.
No, you're absolutely right. I think we all have that opportunity to make some decisions by, create those moments that can continue the momentum of our enjoyment of the hobby. There have been some pet projects that I've had that haven't worked out, and that's learning. That's part of the learning process. I'm fortunate that I have found some that have stuck with me, and it's enjoyable when I'm able to find something that works, that has some longevity to it. But it doesn't always happen right away. Sometimes there's some trial and error involved, and I think that's part of being creative in this hobby.
For sure. I want to jump to a couple of comments that came in a while ago. First of all, Laura, welcome, Laura. Sorry I missed this early. She said Beckett also had great staff supporting their magazine, coming up with unique stories behind certain cards with the wrong players' names. Just a shout out to those early Beckett magazine days that we all could not wait to get every month. And then as a bit of a segue into continuing to talk about budget cards, but as I mentioned in the opening, you collect Oscar Gamble. Mark Santucci raised this about an hour ago. He said, Brett, do you have any late 70s cards of Oscar Gamble? 77, 78, 79. I don't know how. I think Mark Santucci just has player checklists living in his brain. But let's use that as a segue, Brett. Tell us a little bit about, collecting Oscar Gamble. Why? And is it I guess here I'm gonna frame it this way, because this part is about budget collecting. Do you collect Oscar Gamble because he's a budget player to collect, or did it just work out that way that you already had a reason to collect him and he was budget, so that maybe caused you to collect him instead of other players?
It's interesting. So the birth of the Oscar Gamble collection, there's definitely a story behind that, and I'll get to it in a moment. But to go to your question, absolutely, Oscar Gamble collecting. I'm an Oscar Gamble player collector. I added him into my arsenal of what I collect because he's an inexpensive chase. Absolutely. And I've often said he's collecting his cards is one of the most fun collections I've got. And it all stemmed, I blog. I've been blogging for 15 years, not as often as I used to back in the day, but a fellow blogger came up with this idea called wallet card. And it's, you take a favorite baseball card and you just shove it in your wallet. And then after a month or so, let's see what your wallet card looks like. And I didn't have a wallet card at the time. I was conversing with other bloggers, and I had done a transaction with another blogger, and he sent me some other cards as a gift. And one of them was this Oscar Gamble card, which I think is the coolest baseball card there is. I love this card. This card brings a smile to my face every time I look at it. Now, this isn't the one that I was given back in the day. This is the one that I got back in the day. And as you can see, it's nicely protected with some tape now because I put the wallet in the washing machine and it destroyed the card, but I didn't have the heart to get rid of the card. So I'm probably the only guy on the face of the earth with 2 Oscar Gamble cards in his wallet. And I just thought, this is such a great card. I started exploring. How many cards does he have? Linden, he's got over 2,600 cards. That's a big, beefy checklist. Oscar Gamble, a couple of hundred cards. And a lot of them are less than $1. Yeah, he's got some good parallels in some later sets. He's got some one-of-ones even. But the bulk of his cards could be had for a lot less than a lot of the Linden cards that I was chasing at the time. So I built a master checklist and away we go. And it's been fun because I could have gone online and grabbed all of his cards in a heartbeat and, it wouldn't have cost a lot and I'd be done. There's no fun there. So I want to go to the trade shows and the trade nights and the stores, and maybe on a, just fluke. Here in Canada, especially a few years ago, baseball cards, you wouldn't see very many of them. But yeah, I would find Oscar Gamble cards locally, and those are the most fun cards to pick up at a trade night. People are looking at me like, what are you doing with an 83 Oscar Gamble? Yeah, I need to cross that off my list. It's the O-Pee-Chee version, not the Tops. So
I'm embarrassed to say I had to Google to see what sport he played. I knew I was familiar with the name, but I wasn't. Was that an old goaltender for the Vancouver Canucks or a baseball player with fro? I love that picture and that beat up card, Brett. I have to wonder if you could squeeze a PSA 3 or 4 out of that, maybe on a good day. But I also know that grading it is not important to you at all.
No, it wouldn't go in the wallet very easily after that. So
that's right. Too rigid. Too big and rigid. Joe Paul says, Brett, what's your favorite non-card item in your collection?
Non-card item. I've got a few. Excuse me, I'm going to turn around because I put a couple of them on my table behind me.
While you're doing that, I'm just going to, undrafted player here says, this damaged Oscar Gamble card looks like a piece of art now. And I agree. Like, that's the story. That's pretty cool that you carry it around in your wallet, then you put the wallet in the washing machine. I love that.
That's me. That's what I do. So, okay, to go back to the question, favorite non-card item, It's one of my favorites. It's one of the more recent ones that I picked up. Not picked up, sorry. And there's a story behind it. I love the items that have stories. So I'll show it first and then I'll talk about it. So this is a mask book from the 80s, I believe. And for those that know their goalie masks, that's Ken Dryden. And that's his signature to me.
Nice.
And he did a book signing. He did a book signing about 3 years ago. And I took a different book to get signed. And as I was standing in line for him to sign it, I thought, I should have taken my hockey mask book. And I was waiting years. And as soon as I heard he was coming to do another book tour for his latest book, I think it was called The Class. Not even a hockey book. I thought, I'm bringing this and I'm getting him to sign it. And his eyes just lit up when he saw this. This was the book that I would take out from the library when I was a kid over and over and over again. And I admitted, because this was a book signing at a library, I admitted to them, I actually stole this book from the library when I was a kid. I loved it so much, I took it home. And it's just goalie masks. And I would trace every single goalie mask in, like, every single one. And they had little stories about the mask. I'm a goalie mask nut. I love goalie masks.
You collect some goalie mask cards too, don't you?
I do. I love goalie masks, especially the fiberglass, the vintage ones. They're amazing. Jacques Plante, Tony Esposito, you name it. You can see the mask poster over here. I love goalie masks. And so this is...
Why do you love goalie masks? Do you love because it's a medium upon which you get these different artistic designs? Did you play goalie as a kid? Do you like the shit? What is it about goalie masks that really makes you want to collect them and surround yourself with pictures of them?
I think they are the most unique piece of equipment in sports across the board. It's about protection, but it's about expression. There's a lot of uniqueness, and we've lost a lot of that over the years. Now all the masks are pretty generic in the shape and the way that they look. It's just the way that they're airbrushed now that is different. Back in the 60s, goalies didn't even wear masks, most of them, in the 60s and even into the 70s. And to think that, like, the story of Jacques Plante, first goalie to ever wear a goalie mask on a regular basis, a fascinating story. So I loved that story. I loved that here's this piece of equipment. I'm a sucker for sports documentaries, and to hear some of those stories about Jacques Plante. He's in net one night against the Rangers, and he takes a slap shot to the face with no mask on, knocked out. There's no backup goalies back in the day, so he's getting tended to, and he's about to come back onto the ice, and he tells the coach, I'm not coming back without my goalie mask. Coach reluctantly agrees, and he goes on this massive winning spree all of a sudden. The goalie mask is in the league forever. And what an amazing story. And just the crudeness of some of those early designs. I love the evolution of the goalie mask. And then you get into personal expression in the 70s with a guy like, Chico Resch with the New York logo, or Gilles Meloche with the Cleveland Barons, beautiful Barons mask, or Gilles Breton with the lion mask. And these are classic, iconic masks. And then you get into the transition into sort of more the current era, where expression that's what it's all about now. You've got the players themselves completely diving into the process of putting their personality on their mask, and I absolutely love that. So It's something I have always thought to be very, very cool. And so yeah, I love that there have been sets released, goalie mask sets. I've collected those. And then sort of oddball items like this set of, this mask poster is one of 4 from the '88 Olympics that were here in Calgary. And so I've got a set of 4 in the closet, and stuff like that. I'm a sucker for. And that kid's book from way back when, that's a piece that I absolutely love. So to find that, and then to get Ken Dryden to sign it, awesome. That's cherry on top.
Mark Santucci said to me, Jeremy, Oscar played for the Yankees. Thank you, Mark. Terry Fortune's right. I might have been thinking about Canucks goalie Troy Gamble. That's definitely
right.
That's definitely it. Joe Perot says that 76 traded Gamble is a pop 7 in PSA 10. Just FYI, Joe Paulwich says 100% of the personal stories behind the items elevate the items. No doubt, Joe. And then Mike Double V says, Brett, how do you find cards to add to your cup raising checklist?
I stumble upon them literally when I'm going through the quarter box or I'm flipping through a binder. That's literally how I find them. Sometimes it's, I'm looking at, somebody's got some cards that they've posted on social media or whatnot, and I see one, and all of a sudden I make a mental note. I don't even write it down. There's no running checklist that I have. I just see it, and if it looks good and it's the right price, like I'm not buying a $50 cup raiser for my collection. That's not what it's about. If it's the right price, you're darn right I'm going to add it. I love to trade for those cards. That's even more fun when I'm not shelling out any money for my cup raiser cards, because yeah, let's do some trading. I don't do enough of that, especially in person.
Nice. Freddie Esquivel here, same story as you. He has a Pedro Guerrero 1987 Fleer card, all jacked up. It's his first card ever, given to him by a police officer that year. That's how he started his collection of Guerrero. That's right on point there, Freddie. So listen, I wanted to be talking about, we have been talking about budget cards and collecting on a budget, and I almost feel like there's not much more we need to say, because you guys, if you're watching, you can see it and hear it. If you're listening, you can hear it. The passion Brett has for his various PCs within his overall collection, where the cards don't cost very much, like from a dime to $5 oftentimes. The amount of passion this guy has for those cards, it matches the passion that people have for expensive cards. Brett, do you feel that way? Do you, in your own mind, think to yourself, you know what, I'm probably as passionate about what I collect as the guys that are competing for the PSA set registry to have the highest graded Hall of Fame collection, sort of thing? Do you feel like you're, yeah? Yep,
1,000%. And it's not a, for those that like to collect PSA registry and this and that, and that's awesome. And if that's authentic to them, phenomenal. That's fantastic. I'm looking for ways to collect that's authentic to me. It doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like I'm just jumping on to what somebody else is doing. And that, I've got a bit of an active mind sometimes. So I'm always thinking of ways that I can continuously be involved in the hobby, find something that works for me, that works for my budget, that works for, what is appealing to me. I love card photography. I love, to go back to goalie masks, I love cards that have awesome photography. And so, you can do that. You can do, how often do you see a card like that? Willie Plett sitting in the penalty box, water bottle. Like, that's a cool photo. You don't see that on a card very often. Or, you can go the other way, like cards that have just absolutely horrible photos. Like, imagine being this guy and this is your rookie card. Come on, that's unfortunate. They couldn't find a better photo.
They couldn't find one, or he wasn't falling down?
Exactly. Yeah. Like that's the photo they chose. Or how about this one? You like this one?
That's your graduation photo, not your rookie
Photo.
card.
Like that's got to go in some sort of a collection.
That was a Shane Doan card for people listening, not watching. We're going.
Yeah, and I'll put it a bunch of Doug Gilmore. You know, I love these.
I just want to talk because you're doing a lot of visual, but we have an audio component.
Yes.
Too, so I want to make sure we're talking about what we're putting up on the show. MI3 cards here. I love cards that have a good story behind the player or the card. Yeah, no doubt. So Brett, let me ask this. So you do collect on a budget. What's the most you've ever spent on a card? If you're willing to share the amount.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. We've talked about sort of pillar moments in my collecting, and yeah, I can take you back to 2010 and the moment that I spent the absolute most on any hockey card I've ever bought, and you know which card it is because it's one that I think would fit nicely into your collection. It's from 1011 in the game, ultimate memorabilia, 10th edition, and it's the ultimate emblem, Trevor Linden. And this is, when we're talking about cards that, I think about when I think about my collection, this is one that I think about almost immediately every time for a number of reasons.
What are we looking at there, Brett? What are those little squigglies going on? Canuck Place. Tell people right now, guys. Brett is showing us a 1011 up in the game ultimate memorabilia jumbo emblem 1/1 card. Yeah. Trevor Linden. There's no picture of the player on it. This card is showcasing the memorabilia. I love these. I've got like 80 cards from this set in my collection. Some of them are sitting right there in this little cabinet right here. That is full of them. And then I got another set of them right over here. There's 9. So I love these cards. I have them on display. And when Brett got that, I was a little bit like, while I was like, damn, I'd love to have that. I'm like, it's better in Brett's collection than mine. I remember that. But what is that? What is that patch? Tell us what that is.
So that's the shoulder patch from Canucks Place. And it really, again, we go back, I talked about, Trevor does a lot on the ice as a leader. He does a lot off the ice as a leader as well. Trevor Linden Foundation, Canucks Place. Like, he's the kind of guy that will look for opportunities to reach out and help those who, maybe are furthest from opportunity. And I really, that's not him because he's a professional hockey player. That's him because that's who he is. To this day, he is still involved with, nonprofit initiatives and, doing just acts selflessly. And I believe he's not doing it to get headlines or to get, recognition. He's doing it because this is who he is. And that's what this card represents to me. And so to shell out $1,500, which it's funny, I say that number and that's a monstrous amount for me, especially in 2010. $1,500 today, it just doesn't seem like that much for a lot of people in this hobby. And that, I think, again, goes to perspectives and different people have different thoughts as to what, where certain bars are with certain things and certain allowances that we give ourselves in this hobby. For me, it was a big chunk of change. Do I have any regrets? No. Did I make decisions after buying that card? Yes. And that was important for me. I realized that I needed to pay closer attention to how much I was spending every month and what kind of cards I was chasing on a regular basis. And that has followed through to today. I think the pandemic has really changed and elevated sort of prices across the board of cards. Grading has changed the dynamic. We've seen a lot of new people come into the hobby be it as collectors or as investors. And it's changed the game. And I'm still trying to find my footing in a lot of ways. There have been a lot of cards that I've let pass because I'm not ready to pay those prices. And it's because of a card like that Canucks Place 1 of 1 that has helped bring perspective. And how much do I want to spend in a week, in a month, in a year in this hobby? And so having some side projects, some less expensive projects, I can continue to make purchases and find and go to shows, hunt through boxes, and still enjoy the process. Sometimes I might only shell out $10 and I'm thrilled by it. Sometimes I do spend a little bit more, but I know what I'm spending, how much I'm spending, and I pay closer attention to that.
I got 2 questions based on you spending $1,500 on that card. That was the most you'd ever spent. So the first question is, what's the second most you've ever spent? If you have, and I ask because like, I'm just wondering how far above, your average cost per card was $1,500. Are you averaging, under 100, under 50, under 20? Are you averaging 5? Because $1,500, it's a lot of money, of course, but just put in perspective how far and above your comfort zone was that?
I can probably, other than, and there have been a couple of circumstances where there have been some bulk purchases that, anyways, I'm not going to get into it, that between Linden collectors. On a per card basis, I could probably count on one hand the number of times I've spent more than $300 on a card.
Oh, so maybe 5 times you spent over $300. And what is the most frequent amount or range that you spend? The mode, I think that would be called, 50, 25, 10. Like, can you just estimate?
These days, if it's something north of $75, I'm paying close attention. I'm asking questions. Perfect example. There was a SP Signature Legends set that came out recently. Beautiful set of cards. A lot of veteran player, like all-time great players. The Sittlers. I can envision, Hextall or Patrick Waugh or this and that. Well, Trevor Linden's in that set, and he has one of those retro Future Watch autos out of 199. I still don't own one yet because I'm not willing to pay the price when it came out. They're getting $200 for it, and this is an autograph on a card out of 199.
Yeah,
that's unheard of for me. That 20 years ago, that's a $20 card maybe. I still haven't picked one up because it's not low enough for me. I will wait. I'm a patient guy, and I know that there will be one there for me eventually. Patience has been a big part of my process, especially over these last few years, and it's been important because there was a time where I did feel a little bit of burnout, maybe 10, 15 years ago, because it was a 12-month-a-year thing, and you're trying to chase down everything and this, that, and it gets challenging. So, yeah, a lot of questions and a lot of evolution going on.
So my second question on that was going to be, once you spent that $1,500 on that card, I kind of feel like I get a sense from you that might have been a bit of like a watershed moment for you because, once you spend that far out of your comfort zone on a single piece for your collection, as important as it may be, it can open the floodgates a little bit if you're not careful and be like, well, hey, once, I've kind of broken the cherry, now I can do it again, sort of thing, right? Yeah. And I guess my question is, I'm trying to figure out how to word this properly, but like, did that cause you, because now you're minus $1,500 in the bank account, did it cause you to not buy as many of those, say, $300 cards or $200 or $100 cards? Did it change anything in your head in terms of how you approach the hobby from that point forward, budget wise?
Yeah, I think I paid closer attention to cards, their availability or potential availability in the future. Cards that I knew that, there would be plenty of copies of down the road. I didn't need a copy of it right away. So I can be patient with that. I can wait. This isn't a race for me. I'm not going to fill this checklist anytime soon. I plan on collecting Trevor Linden cards when I'm in my 80s and my 90s. That's my goal. And so picking and choosing the moments. And it's weird because it's on a card by card basis. There's a card, it's a dual auto out of 100 with Linden and Naslund from, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. I picked up the copy out of 25 for less than $15. I refuse to pay more than $15 for the card out of 100. I've yet to see a copy for it under that price, and I refuse to pay more than $15 for it. I may never own the card because of that, but in my head, that's the justification I've created. There are some cards where I'll go to town on it. I know that, okay, this might be the only moment that I find this card ever again. And that happened a few years ago. It was from Upper Deck MVP. It was the year of the Crosby and Ovechkin rookie cards. And that product just doesn't get busted a lot. So the Pro Sign Auto of Linden, I didn't see a copy of that for years. And one popped up, and I thought to myself, I'm going all in on this. I'm going to pay way more than people think this card is worth, because at that moment, I made the decision. I wanted this card in my collection, and I justified it in my head, and I allowed myself permission to buy that card at that price. And
How much was it?
It was 80. I paid less than $80 for it, but I had a bid, about $150 on it.
And what do you think that if you were not in the bidding, what does that card sell for?
I think it's not numbered. It's a sticker auto. People would be like, how is this not in a $5 box? Really? It's a Linden auto, but it's from a product that doesn't get opened. And it's a hard auto to find from that product. I went years without even seeing a copy, let alone having a chance.
Yeah.
And it was, we can chat about this too. It was the year that I took a hiatus from the summer collecting.
I remember that. I remember when you took, I remember your hiatus. Yeah. I forgot about it, but I remember that now.
I took a hiatus.
Okay, hold on.
Mm-hmm.
This is interesting. Why did Brett Miles take a hiatus? It's not like it's not like you were spending your rent money and your food money on cards. Maybe you were actually. Why did you, and I'm going to call you a budget collector, except for your $1,500 card. Why did you feel the need? Explain that.
So at that time, I just felt there was a lot in my hobby world, whatever it was. There were a lot of releases with Linden in it. It felt overwhelming for a little bit. And it felt, I kind of felt burnt out almost. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go old school. I'm going to go back to when I was in the 80s, when, you would take the summer off from collecting. You would finish sort of, April, and then you'd start again in September, October when the new product comes out. And that's exactly what I did. I made a decision. I can't remember what date it was. Might have been May 1st or June 1st. I said, that's it. I'm not checking eBay. I'm not checking any online forums. I'm not buying anything. Whatever comes and goes, that just is what happens. And this was at a time, to this day, I still check eBay hourly for Linden cards. It's so easy to do now. And I just thought, you know what, let's try putting it all aside for a few months and see what happens. And I enjoyed it. There was no pressure. I was like, I'm not buying anything. I'm not thinking about cards as much. And that's the first time that had happened in a long time. And I did enjoy it. And I don't know what the circumstance was, but just maybe stars align. And I decided about midway through, I'm just going to check. And I did. And I saw that card pop up. in the auction, and I thought, you've got to be kidding me. That card would have passed. I would have never have known that that was even up for auction. And I thought, okay, I'm making an exception for this one card. And after that, okay, now I'm on vacation for the rest of the time. So I took the rest of the summer off.
Wow, it's crazy that you put that limitation on yourself. You gave yourself, you gave yourself a break from the break. You said, I'm going to go check eBay. You see that card you've been waiting for years. You snag it. You go back on vacation. You go back on hiatus. All right. Let's go to some more comments here. Chris C says budgeting is key indeed, and it's why I no longer buy any graded cards, I guess because they're too expensive. However, it's not easy when sellers are charging PSA 9 prices for raw. Sounds to me like that's modern, ultra modern collecting, Chris C. And at least you know what you're into. And at that point, well, maybe you can buy PSA 8s and get them for less than raw. That's an option, or buy raw. But I hear what you're saying, Chris. Steve Clifton says obtaining most cards don't necessarily have a story for me, but the player connects me with memories of my youth. Recently bought a Gilbert Perreault and Rick Martin rookie cards, my favorite players as a kid in Buffalo. Yeah, I think that's an important point Steve Clifton makes, is that not every card needs a story, but the ones that have them become really special in our collections. Joe Pawich says, cost of living and realizing I couldn't be a completionist were watershed moments for me. I have an arbitrary budget and try to stick with it. Good on you for staying strong too. Except for when you gave yourself the break, went to eBay, and bought the card for more than for about 16 times what it might have sold for at a card show.
We're not perfect people. We're not perfect people, Jeremy.
No, and I love that you gave yourself you can do what you want. You're in full control. Here's a comment from Al. Al says, Brett, has Instagram helped you in your collecting activities? Example, seeing new Linden cards, other collectors contacting you. Is eBay still your main source? You want to just cover off Al's questions here?
Sure, yeah. I love Instagram. I love looking at other people's collections through Instagram. Al's a perfect example of this. His Iginla collection, he posts Iginla cards, and it's everything from, inexpensive parallels and this, I just love watching other collectors going, hey, look what I found. It's so great. And so, yeah, I love that aspect of it. I discover other player collectors that way. There was a guy I stumbled across, collects Nick Patan. I'm like, Nick Patan, okay. And I thought, I have a patch card in my trade box of Nick Patan. It's been sitting in there for who knows how many years. So I reached out to him. I'm like, you got an address? Plunk, away it goes. And he opened it up, and his jaw hit the ground. And I thought, you're going to get far more enjoyment out of that card than I will, or anybody that I eventually trade that card to, because there's very few Nick Patan collectors out there. So I love that aspect of it. So enjoying other player collectors, that's what I really get out of it. In terms of, finding new Lindens, I don't find it very often. I see every once in a while, like a really nice Linden card pop up, and I smile and I make note of who has it. And then that's about it. That I think it was the foundation, the mega patch, the auto with the booklet. Yeah, he's got some amazing cards, Linden, that I'm never going to see. So as long as I know where they live, I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. It's a tough thing for those of us who collect a player and we see a card that we would really like to have. And you just kind of, because there's so many great cards of so many different players now, you just, I want to say you can't have everything. Some people, I guess, can have everything, but I can't. And most of us, 99+% of us cannot have everything.
Yep.
And so you have to pick and choose, and whether you need to sell cards to get into new cards. Go ahead.
Absolutely. I just want to say, I think there are a lot of player collectors, and for myself included for a little while, I would get frustrated by that. there's so many great cards out there that I'm not going to be able to obtain because sellers have high prices on them, or this guy isn't moving it from his collection, or, this guy's, back in the day, you heard the phrase held it for ransom. And you know what? I've come, to the conclusion that that's reality. That's life. And I either got to suck it up and accept it and enjoy the hobby for what it is. I can still be a completionist in mindset, knowing that I'm never going to check off every one of these cards on the list. And I love that. This is going to keep me busy for a long, long time. And so I'm going to enjoy it for what I get out of it. And I get to make those rules.
The thing is, and this is the thing that you have that a lot of people don't, and that is like this pure passion for what you're collecting. And I feel like I want this episode to help people to see that you can collect. You don't have to be collecting the best. You don't have to be collecting Michael Jordan or Tom Brady or Wayne Gretzky. You can be collecting other players too. You don't have to collect the hottest rookie every year, the Wembanyamas or whoever it happens to be at that time, the Connor Bedards, right? You don't have to be collecting. You can collect other, but a lot of people, it seems to me like a lot of recent years, a lot of people come into the hobby, they don't have a connection to a player. So they're searching for a reason to collect. And like you said, you're not in a rush. You'll do this. This will keep you very busy for a very long time. The advantage you have is that real, true, authentic passion. And I guess I hope that people who kind of look at that and say, I want to be like that, but they don't have that player, I hope that they can find it. Or maybe it's another sort of source of passion. It's a set, an aesthetic that they love, whatever it might be, a team, a theme, something. I hope. Yeah.
Absolutely. And sorry to cut you off there, but absolutely. One of my favorite collections that someone else has is theme based, and it's Name Cardinals Indigenous Rookie Card Collection. And I know that there's a lot of meaning behind that collection for Name. I love seeing the cards that he adds to his collection. There's a lot of meaning behind that. Is everybody going to be able to find that deep of meaning in their player and in their collection? Maybe not, probably not, quite frankly. But I think there's opportunities there. Somebody mentioned earlier about the super collector in the Beckett magazine. And it's funny because I was flipping through one earlier this week and, super collector, Peter Ing. And I was like, holy, he's an obscure goalie from way back in the 90s. And I thought, there's a guy out there collecting Peter Ing, or there's a guy out there collecting Chris Versteeg, or, Jimmy Howard, or Arthur Survey. And
Brett, the thing is, and I just want to mention, like, this, Brett is naming off hockey players, but this happens in all sports.
Absolutely.
Obscure, not super high-end players are collected by a lot of collectors. And I feel like also, Brett, that now with just the rise of social media, that a lot of people mistakenly think that the whole hobby lives on Instagram or X or YouTube or Facebook, and that's just not the case.
Well, not only that, but I think there's a hyper focus on a select group of superstar players. There are some amazing players in this league that do awesome things, maybe awesome things off the ice too, and explore that. Like, I would love to see, I'm sure there are guys that are going, Dakota Joshua is going to be my guy. I love seeing him on the third line. You know what? Let's get some Connor Garland while we're at it. Let's do that. I love the way that he plays, or you see players, do stuff out in the community. I'm going to connect to that. That's my connection to this player. See what happens. Not everybody, I hate to say it, I don't think everybody can collect Connor Bedard, because the rarity of cards out there is going to create probably more frustration than satisfaction for a lot of people.
Yeah, especially on the low print run cards for
Exactly.
sure. The young guns are out there for everybody. There's enough of those to go around. That's for sure.
Yeah.
All right. We are going to start the wind up process for the show simply, because we're getting there, but also my voice isn't going to hold up much. Not that you need me to talk. Maybe you can do the rest of the talking. Let's go through some comments here. First of all, welcome Jeremy M to the chat. Good to see you, Jeremy. Chris C says, awesome gesture, Brett, on the Nick Patan patch card that you sent off. I bet that made that guy's day with a patch card. I'm for sure that is a great gesture for sure. Mark Santucci says, Brett, do you have a favorite Linden card that is not the rookie card?
Ooh, you know what? Okay, and it's funny because we talked this whole show about, it's not about the flex and it's not about the stature and whatnot. I'm going to rank this one, and it's 2 cards.
He's about to flex, everybody. He's about to flex.
I hate to say it, and I apologize, but this again, and there's a story behind it. But this is the Linden Captain C, and for those of you listening, it's 2 cards, and the top half is the top half of the C of his captaincy, and the bottom card is the bottom half of the C. And these are both 1-of-1s, and I remember getting these both off of eBay, both at the same time, and the bubble envelopes came to the post office on the same day. So I opened both at the same time, and I thought, again, when I look at this, I think this is who Trevor is. He's the captain of the team. He is the leader. And again, I sound like a broken record, but it's on the ice and it's off the ice, and that's who he is to me.
That's such a lucky thing you have in your player that you collect, to know that not only was he a great team member, team leader, team captain, but he was also all those things in the community as well. Just makes you feel right. Yeah, you got another card to show?
Can I show one that is inexpensive, if I can find it real quick? Because
I could joke around and say no inexpensive cards, but that wouldn't be so funny. So let's see it.
So I love this card as well. And this is the jersey he's wearing. People might not, be able to place it. But this is from the 94 lockout year in the NHL. And he's wearing the NHLPA 4-on-4 tournament jersey for Team Western Canada. And this was an event held in Hamilton to raise money for some charity, for some charities. And he played on Team Western Canada. And I thought it was the coolest thing to see him play. He was put on a line with Joe Sakic. And I thought for months after that, the Canucks have got to trade for the Sakic guy because he's awesome. And they had such great chemistry on the ice. And I love the design of this card. I love, the photo that's used. And again, this is just a simple, 20-cent card, 10-cent card. But it's one that it's so unique. And I think, it takes me back to a certain time period of his playing days. That era of early 90s when, the Canucks were magic at that time, the Stanley Cup run. And just he was a part of some awesome moments in hockey.
The Stanley Cup run of '94 when the Canucks succumbed to Mark Messier and the New York Rangers. All right, let's put that behind us right now. Joe Pawich says that both Jeremy and Brett are no strangers to performing acts of hobby kindness, and I can speak from experience. Thank you, Joe, for the shout out. Name says, thank you, Brett, for the shout out. Always appreciated your support. That's Name from Indigenous Rookie Cards. Chris C says, keeping or getting new people in the hobby is also paramount. I donated cards to my friend's Little League team and gave some cards to an LCS to hand out to kids who stop by. I also always like to suggest Halloween. You got base cards lying around, go grab a pack of team bags from your local hobby supply store and put 10 or whatever base cards in there and just give them away on Halloween. As I always like to say, also give candy, but give away hockey cards or baseball or football or basketball cards or soccer or Pokemon as well. Julio says, one chase I began to include to my overall collection has been players that helped carry my fantasy hockey team to the end. And I've thought about, for years, okay, I like my fantasy team this year. Maybe I want to get one of those. Remember those old 9? It was like it's almost like a one touch or a screw down, but it would have slots for 9 cards. I thought, I'm going to, my favorite 9 players for my fantasy team, I'm going to put them in one of those and put them up on the wall, and I'll change it out every year with my new fantasy team. But I love that.
That's a cool idea. I like that a lot. That's cool.
That's very cool. Very cool. And Yankees fan says, great story getting the 2 C's, same time, same day. And my follow-up question on those, Brett, was like, you said you bought them on eBay at the same time. Like, how did you win the competition? Not like, did you just have to outbid people where they buy it now? It's like, how did one of your Linden collector friends / foes not scoop in on one of those from you?
So I had won the first one, and it was in process of being shipped. And I think the other Linden collectors knew that. And I'll admit, I don't do this much. I did it more back in the day. Card would come up for sale on eBay. Well, you just reach out to the seller and go, did you do an off eBay sale by chance? I just happened to get the, here's what I'll offer you. And he took it. And so, yeah, I had the first one basically in hand or, purchased. And it was on its way when the second one surfaced. And I think, I can't remember the full details on that, but I do remember having a clearer path to it. But also, I took some extra, incentives on my own.
But do you remember the sense of urgency you felt when you saw the second piece come up, considering you had already bought the first? Like, what was that feeling?
It goosebumps. Because the fact that the card itself even surfaced, I think, was amazing enough. I just was in shock. I couldn't believe it. There it is. There's the second piece to. And at the time, there were no cards like that out there, and I thought, that's the second
and final. I mean, that's the only card in the world that you need to pair with that first one. Like, that sense of urgency and almost desperation. It must have been overwhelming, because that your competitors are also searching eBay for Trevor Linden cards every 5 to 15 minutes, sort of thing, and they can come on at any time and just put in a big bid or reach out. I mean, back in the day, people used to often ask for off eBay deals. Now eBay's clamped down, and sellers overtly state that they will not, end early. But back then it was common. That you must have felt desperate. Hey, nervous.
It was more nervous, more excited. Like, I was excited by it. There was some energy. I didn't feel desperation, and I think, because at that point in my collecting career, I had a really good, and I mean really good, rapport with a number of Linden collectors, like the guys that were also completionists. And there's a number of them. And I mentioned, to this day, I feel like I could still reach out to them. I had a really good rapport. I could only imagine what it would have been like if we didn't know one another, or we didn't have that strong of a rapport. It would have been way more cutthroat. And I don't know where it would have taken me in terms of how much I would have been willing to pay at the time. So,
are those guys still collecting Linden?
I know a couple of them are. Absolutely. There's one I keep in contact with. We send emails every once in a while. He's not on any hobby boards or anything like that, but I do keep in touch with him. And then there were a couple of guys who were on the Hobby Insider boards quite a bit back in the day, and I'm just so grateful for those guys. Kevin K. Mitchell, Victor Lee, and then Elliot Choi. Like, those are 3 guys that really, I think, helped form my Linden collection. We've traded over the years. I've been able to make purchases from those guys, but there's so much like they're very giving people themselves. And if I can show one more card tonight real quick, it's the one that was in the thumbnail of the decades patch, and it came from Victor, and it was the final one to finish off my set of, you know, jersey numbers, patches. You know, they had a black version, a silver version, and a gold version. And this is the gold emblem 1/1 Trevor Linden patch from the decades 80s set that came out from In the Game. And this was in Victor's collection. And he reached out to me, and he basically said, let's make a trade. This fits into your collection more than it does mine.
Nice.
And yeah, I will remember this card for that forever. Because that, to me, I'm very grateful to have Linden collectors come in and out of my world that have been a part of my story and not, you know, combative and you know, my nemesis. So grateful for that.
Okay. We are going to wrap up, but first, a great question just came in from a new name in the chat, David Alderson. So first of all, David, welcome to, do you know David?
I do know Dave. Yeah.
All right. Do I know Dave?
Nope.
Okay. So here's the question. He says, I'm assuming there have been some lulls throughout your collecting career. What caused them? And is there anything that would stop your obsession with card collecting? I think it's a really great question. So answer this, and then we are going to wrap up the episode.
Hey, Dave. Thanks for popping by. Lulls in my collecting. Yeah, there have been times where it's probably been more so to maybe some burnout and me slowing down on purpose. There are times in this hobby where we feel maybe the hobby gets a little more in control and we start losing control and we are at the mercy of the hobby. And I've learned over the decades, literally, that I'm in the one who's in control of the hobby. So I can now, you know, take my foot off the throttle and continue to enjoy the hobby. You know, I mentioned earlier in the show, I took a whole summer off one year. Well, almost a full summer off. And that was done on purpose. My blogging is another example. 10 years ago, I was blogging every day or every other day. Now it's maybe once a month. You know, I've gone as long as a full year in between posts, but that blog is there for me. As much as I enjoy sharing my stories and other people can see them and read them, that's there for me for when I want to type something out and I have something to say and I have the time to say it. I love that I'm in control of that now, and I can put it aside for when I want it. And that's collecting in general. So have there been lulls? What has caused them? Sometimes it's other interests or other, you know, life. It's life, you know, you get busy in life. So, but I know that the hobby's always there and it's always going to be a positive. That's my goal, is to always have it be a positive.
Nice stuff. Chris C says, thank you both for the great chat. Brett keeps it all in perspective. Collect what you want at your own pace. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And Robert Scott says the hobby is sorely missing this kind of passion. Great collector and episode. And I knew that Brett would be a hit with a lot of people in the audience. All right, guys. So thank you, everybody, for your engagement in the chat. You've been alive tonight, so that's great. Says a lot about our guest tonight, that's for sure. Speaking of whom, he's talked about his blog, guys. It's on the ticker right now, myhockeycardobsession.blogspot.com, and you can follow him on Instagram and X at Bam Linden, BAMLINDEN, Bam Linden. Brett, so the episode is over, but Brett, I want to give you a chance to say some parting words. Chat, any more comments, get them in there. We're done in about a minute. So Brett, over to you to put a bow on this thing.
I got a couple of things. And actually, I'm going to share some words that you had in one of your episodes of Vintage Spotlight. You said reality is different than logic. There are times when reality is different than logic. This hobby can be extremely illogical at times. Extremely illogical. We make decisions based on emotion. We make decisions based on sometimes just volatility we have the opportunity, and I'll say it over and over and over again, to be the controllers of that. And I have to accept the landscape for what it is. Would I like more of this or more of that? Absolutely. Would I like cheaper Linden cards? Sure, why not? But that's not always what it's going to be. So I have to get comfortable in the environment. And I think over the years, I have gotten to a place where I'm very comfortable now. I enjoy the simple pleasures of what my hobby provides, be it looking through what I've acquired, maintaining my checklist. I love adding new cards to my list. Some people think it's a task. I love having a master checklist that I'm super proud of. Call me crazy. Finding the joy in the aspects of collecting, and then, you know what, really grabbing onto that, because there's a lot of volatility, there's a lot of negativity, and I try and push that. I'm not interested in that. I really am not. It's a turnoff for me. So there's a lot of good people out there. There is a lot of positivity out there. And I think that, to me, is what I want to share with everybody. Just be, we do good things and good things happen. So, yeah.
All right. Good stuff. So to wrap it up, Al G, thank you very much. Al says, great conversation. Name, loved the episode. Thank you, Name. Thank you, Joe. Good to see you, buddy. Mark Santucci, I will see you in Cleveland. I do not have a booth, but I will see you there, I am sure. Everybody, thank you for joining. Hope you enjoyed this one. I know I did. Brett, great to have you on after all this time. So thank you for joining, and everybody in the chat, thank you for being here. We'll be back next Saturday for more episodes, and I'll be back tomorrow night with Josh Madigan of the Hockey Cards Gong Show podcast to cover the hockey cards ending on PWCC's weekly auction. Guys, with that, this episode of Sports Cards Live for July the 13th, 2024 is now over.